Millionaire promised the world to his mistress but forgot his pregnant wife's birthday. Meet Alexander Van Doren, a self-made millionaire, so used to getting everything he wants that he's forgotten how much it costs others. His life is a tapestry of luxurious galas, glittering diamonds, and secret rendezvous. But beneath the polished veneer, he's about to discover that a man who can buy the world might lose what truly matters most. Driven by obsession, he dares to promise the world to his radiant mistress, all while ignoring the quiet heartbreak of his pregnant wife. When a forgotten birthday sets off a chain of cataclysmic events, Alexander's world careens toward disaster. Secrets will unravel, loyalties will shatter, and no amount of money can save him now. Alexander Van Doren was, by all appearances, the perfect portrait of success. He was lean, tall, and strikingly handsome, with sharp blue eyes that seemed to pierce through whoever stood before him. His family name carried weight, but his true fortune was self-made, a sprawling real estate empire built upon a single risky investment he'd made at just 24 years old. By 30, he had multiplied that fortune 100-fold. Now, at 36, he was poised to double it yet again. He lived in the affluent enclave of Westbridge Hills, where gated mansions lined the streets like jewels in a crown. Neighbors spoke his name in hushed tones, a mix of envy and admiration. He had everything he wanted, or so it seemed. The truth was, in the silent corners of his life, dissatisfaction brewed like a storm. Alexander craved excitement, an addiction to adrenaline, and the thrill of conquering every obstacle. His wife, Catherine Van Doren, was the epitome of dignity and grace. Once an aspiring poet, she had traded her ambitions for the life of a corporate wife, attending charity events and nodding dutifully by her husband's side. Despite her own silent yearnings, Catherine held steadfastly to love and loyalty. She was 9 months pregnant with their first child, her belly a gentle curve that symbolized a long, cherished dream, but the glow that once marked her features had dimmed in recent months, replaced by worry lines carved from loneliness and suspicion. The tension in the mansion was palpable. Lately, Alexander had seemed preoccupied, spending many nights in his study or at business meetings. Catherine had begun to wonder, had she done something wrong? Was the pregnancy too much for him? Or perhaps there was someone else occupying that space in his heart. She tried to dismiss the thought, but women's intuition rarely lies dormant for long. Then came an innocent hint of reality that Catherine couldn't ignore. One night, while searching for her car keys, she found a receipt for an extremely expensive bracelet in Alexander's jacket pocket. Engraved on it was a message that read, "For my shining star, AV." Now, Catherine's name had no V in it, and though the initials matched her husband, the note looked suspiciously intimate. Panic churned inside her, but she told herself it could be for business, perhaps a thank you gift for an investor or something along those lines. Yet the seed of doubt took root. In the days that followed, Catherine became more observant. She noticed Alexander's phone lighting up late at night with texts from someone named AP. She noticed the hush in his voice whenever he answered these calls. She felt the distance, colder than any winter frost, growing between them. But still, she tried to hope, to believe that once the baby arrived, everything would fall back into place. Little did she know that delicate facade of normalcy was on the brink of shattering, sending the Van Doren household into turmoil from which it might never recover. Anastasia Pierce was Alexander's secret, a secret that roared like a wildfire beneath the surface of his otherwise controlled existence. She was a striking woman with raven hair and emerald green eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischievous curiosity. In many ways, she was the polar opposite of Catherine, yet she carried a certain allure that Alexander found irresistible. They'd met 6 months ago at a fundraising gala for the Westbridge Hills Arts Council, a place Alexander had attended more out of obligation than genuine interest. Yet upon spotting Anastasia across the room, her laughter echoing, her slender figure accentuated by a simple but elegant black dress, he'd felt a spark he could not ignore. Their first encounter was innocent enough. She'd merely introduced herself, praising his charitable contributions to local youth art programs. One drink led to another, and conversation flowed like a well-aged wine. Soon they were meeting under hushed arrangements at an upscale lounge downtown, away from the prying eyes of Westbridge Hills. They told themselves it was just a harmless flirtation, but lines blurred quickly. Anastasia was no naive college girl enamored by wealth. She was a sophisticated woman who had carved a path in the art world, curating exhibitions and traveling extensively. She was used to attention and men with money. Yet something about Alexander tugged at her heartstrings more intensely than she'd anticipated. Perhaps it was the subtle vulnerability lurking behind his confident exterior, or maybe it was his magnetic aura of possibility. He made lavish promises, whispered in her ear about a future filled with travel, romance, and a place of her own in his heart. She believed, or at least wanted to believe, that these promises were real. But as the months unfolded, Anastasia found herself catching glimpses of Alexander's deeper complexities, his restlessness, his unspoken burdens, and the ring that still glinted on his left hand whenever he forgot to take it off in her presence. She often wondered about Catherine, but Alexander's dismissals were always the same. It's complicated. She doesn't understand me like you do, or we're practically living separate lives now. He insisted a divorce was on the horizon, painting an image of a marriage that was more a business arrangement than a union of hearts. Stolen weekends in Montauk, secret lunches in hidden bistros, midnight phone calls brimming with passion. It was easy for Anastasia to lose herself in the fantasy. She craved the adrenaline too, thriving on the illicit thrill, but deep down, she yearned for stability. She wanted to be more than just a hidden mistress. She believed Alexander when he promised that soon it would just be the two of them. Now, with Catherine's pregnancy nearing its final weeks, the pressure mounted. Alexander was starting to show signs of agitation. He was jumpy, glancing at his phone every few minutes, always on alert. Anastasia felt the simmer of urgency in their conversations, as if a storm was about to break, yet she held fast to the illusions he'd spun around her. After all, he was Alexander Van Doren, the brilliant millionaire who had never failed in any venture. If anyone could make impossible dreams come true, it had to be him. What she didn't know was that behind the bravado, Alexander was dancing on thin ice, and every step threatened to plunge them all into the freezing darkness beneath. Back at the Van Doren mansion, the tension thickened with every passing day. Catherine's due date edged closer, and with it came a surge of emotional fragility. She found herself fending off swirling anxieties about motherhood, about her marriage, and about the unspeakable secret she feared might be unfolding before her very eyes. She tried to confront Alexander at dinner one night, choosing her words carefully, desperate for reassurance. "Alex," she began softly, tracing the rim of her glass of water, "I feel like we're drifting. Is something on your mind?" He looked up from his phone, seemingly startled. "What makes you say that?" "I've just been busy at work. You know how it is," he replied, offering the faintest of smiles. His eyes, however, revealed no warmth. Catherine pressed on, uncertain if she should mention the bracelet receipt or the mysterious late-night texts. But she stopped short, her heart hammered, fearing that speaking the words aloud would make them irrevocably real. She settled instead for a whispered question. "Don't you think we should spend more time together before the baby arrives? Maybe a short trip, just us?" Alexander grimaced slightly. The very thought of stepping away from his swirling entanglements, business deals. His affair seemed like a burden. "We'll have time," he said tersely, returning his attention to his phone as if the conversation had already ended. That night, Catherine wept silently in bed while Alexander dozed off in his office, lulled by spreadsheets and clandestine messages from Anastasia. The future that once promised warmth and familial bliss was turning cold. If only Catherine had known how complicated things were behind the scenes. Days later, an ominous cloud settled over Westbridge Hills, literally and figuratively. A slow-moving storm churned in the Atlantic, threatening to drench the coastline in torrential rain. The local news couldn't stop warning about flash floods and hurricane-force winds. Yet the warnings did little to shift the course of the emotional storm taking shape within the Van Doren circle. For while Catherine was preparing for a baby, Anastasia was preparing to claim what she believed was rightfully hers. She'd grown restless with Alexander's excuses. Why did he refuse to make their relationship public? Why did he keep delaying the big talk about leaving Catherine? The frustration swelled into resentment, and resentment gave birth to bold decisions. Late one evening, she texted Alexander, "Anastasia, we need to talk, face to face. I want answers." But answers were not something Alexander was prepared to give just yet. His business deals were teetering on critical negotiations. A lucrative land development near Charleston was about to net him tens of millions. He needed to maintain focus, to keep his composure. He responded curtly, "Alexander, soon, my star. I promise. Just need to wrap up a few things." Anastasia read the message and felt a swirl of conflicting emotions, hope, anger, longing. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being strung along. Perhaps it was time to make Alexander see that she wasn't a mere accessory. Maybe she should make a bold appearance at the Van Doren mansion or confront him at his office. But would that risk losing him entirely? Fear and determination wrestled in her mind. Meanwhile, Catherine found herself alone in the mansion more often. She tried to distract herself by tidying the nursery, a serene space painted in soft green, with a crib made from the finest wood. But emptiness lingered in every corner of that grand house. She quietly decided that if Alexander wouldn't share his burdens with her, she'd uncover the truth on her own. Little did any of them realize that the approaching literal storm was merely a harbinger of the chaos and heartbreak that awaited. Catherine's birthday arrived on a day marked by incessant rainfall. Wind whipped the trees in the Van Doren estate's expansive garden, scattering leaves across the marble driveway. The storm had intensified overnight, and the weather mirrored Catherine's inner turmoil. She'd never been one to demand grand gestures or expensive gifts. A simple, heartfelt acknowledgement would have sufficed. In years past, Alexander would lavish her with roses, jewelry, or romantic dinners in five-star restaurants. They would dance, laugh, and talk about their shared dreams. Yet this year, as the sun struggled to break through the storm clouds, there was no sign of Alexander. Not even a text message. Catherine rose early, heart fluttering with a faint optimism. Perhaps he planned a surprise? She had to allow him that benefit of the doubt. She showered, dressed in a loose, comfortable sweater that stretched over her pregnant belly, and tiptoed downstairs. The house was silent, echoing her hopes back to her in empty hushes. By mid-morning, her phone remained quiet. No calls, no texts, just the relentless pounding of the rain on the windows. She sipped tea alone in the spacious living room, trying not to let her tears overflow. The day dragged on, each hour a cruel reminder that the man she loved was too lost in his own world to remember something as simple as her birthday. And where was Alexander? He was in an upscale penthouse suite downtown, far from the prying eyes of Westbridge Hills. A last-minute business conference call had turned into a celebratory lunch with potential investors. And that lunch turned into an impromptu dinner. Throughout it all, he was accompanied by Anastasia. She'd demanded a face-to-face meeting to discuss their future, and Alexander, hoping to placate her, invited her to the city under the guise of business. In the plush intimacy of that penthouse, they shared whispered confidences and sipped champagne. Anastasia prodded him about the timeline for his divorce, pressing harder than she ever had before. Her green eyes burned with resolve. "You keep saying you'll leave Catherine. You said you'd do it before the baby arrived, so we could start our life. But time's running out, Alexander." He swallowed hard, scanning the room as if searching for an exit. "Things are complicated, Anna. You know that," he said, employing the gentle tone he used whenever he tried to calm her. "Once this business deal closes, I'll make the final move, I promise." Thunder rumbled in the distance, lightning splitting the sky. A flicker of guilt surfaced in Alexander's eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. His phone buzzed on the coffee table, but he ignored it. He was too ensnared by Anastasia's allure, too intoxicated by the escape she provided. He never once glanced at the date or realized its importance. Even as night fell, Catherine's phone remained silent of any birthday wishes from her husband. Alone in a darkened living room, the storm raging outside her windows, she made a promise to herself after the baby was born. She would confront Alexander directly. No more doubts or uncertainties. She wanted the truth, whether it shattered her heart or not. For Alexander, this single oversight for getting his pregnant wife's birthday would prove to be the first domino in a cascade of devastating consequences. The morning after Catherine's forgotten birthday, the storm had finally abated, but the atmosphere within the Van Doren mansion remained suffused with tension. Catherine woke up feeling numb. She hadn't slept well. Every time she closed her eyes, memories of happier birthdays flooded her consciousness. She remembered how Alexander once surprised her with a hot air balloon ride, how he serenaded her on a whim. Now, that seemed like another lifetime. She mustered the courage to confront him, but found the master bedroom empty. In his usual spot on the nightstand, Alexander's phone was missing. So was he. Instead, she found a terse note, "Had an early meeting. Don't wait up." The words stung like a slap to the face. Her birthday gone, unacknowledged. She wondered if he even remembered now. By noon, Catherine decided she could no longer ignore her suspicions. She needed proof, solid evidence of Alexander's infidelity. Gathering her resolve, she went to his home office. It was a spacious room, lined with dark wooden shelves and encyclopedias of business strategies, with a large mahogany desk dominating the center. In that desk was a locked drawer. She'd seen him open a few times, always discreetly. Her heart pounded as she rifled through his keys until she found the small one that fit. The drawer clicked open to reveal a stack of documents. Nestled among them was a small black journal with handwritten notes and receipts tucked into the pages. She flipped through quickly, eyes widening at what she saw, travel itineraries to luxury hotels. She had never stayed in with him. Designer shopping receipts for items far too intimate to be for business associates. And pictures. Selfies he'd taken with Anastasia in fancy restaurants, at art exhibits, and once on a yacht, each one capturing their secret world. Catherine's breath caught in her throat as she studied the woman in the photos. Anastasia was stunning everything Catherine had once been, perhaps. But it wasn't just jealousy that roiled in Catherine's gut. It was betrayal, heartbreak, and a fierce determination. She now had confirmation of her husband's double life. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. Footsteps in the hallway jolted her, and she hastily shoved everything back into the drawer, locking it. She could barely compose herself when Alexander walked in, a troubled expression on his face. "Kath, what are you doing in here?" he asked, noticing her tremor. She closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and turned to face him. For a moment, neither spoke. Catherine was torn between accusing him outright and preserving the little dignity she had left. In the end, she said, "We need to talk," her voice steadied by an undercurrent of rage and heartbreak. Alexander looked uneasy. "Yes, we do, but maybe later. I have important calls." "Important calls?" she echoed, her voice edged with anger. "What about my birthday, Alexander? Or does that not matter anymore?" He seemed genuinely startled, a flash of realization crossing his face. "Catherine, I'm sorry. It slipped my mind with all the chaos at work. She held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't, just don't." "We'll talk tonight," she said, her voice quivering with hurt, but also steeled by knowledge. With that, she brushed past him, leaving Alexander to grapple with the first stirrings of real guilt. What neither of them could predict was just how explosive that evening's conversation would be and how its repercussions would extend far beyond the walls of their mansion. Night descended on Westbridge Hills with a certain heaviness, as if the air itself braced for an impending confrontation. Catherine spent the day locked in a mental tug-of-war. Her heart wept for the marriage she once had, yet her mind screamed for answers, resolution, no matter how painful it might be. By the time Alexander returned home, she was waiting in the living room, perched on the edge of the couch like a sentinel. The room was awash in the dim glow of a single lamp, casting dramatic shadows on the walls. Catherine's expression was resolute, her posture poised. "We talk now," she said firmly the moment he stepped inside. Alexander set down his briefcase and loosened his tie, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere else. But there was no escaping. Not this time. Catherine wasted no time. She retrieved the stack of incriminating documents and photographs from the desk drawer, laying them out on the coffee table like evidence in a courtroom. "Do you want to explain these?" she asked, her voice heartbreakingly calm. Alexander froze, color draining from his face. He glanced at the images of him and Anastasia, the receipts, the notes scrawled in the little black journal. Lies dangled on the tip of his tongue, but he could no longer pretend. "Catherine, who is she?" Catherine's voice cracked, just enough to reveal her underlying pain. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. "Her name is Anastasia Pierce. We met some months ago." It was never supposed to go this far. Catherine's eyes glistened with tears she fought to hold back. "But it did. And you chose her over your own wife, your pregnant wife. Why, Alexander?" She waited, but no meaningful excuse came. "Have you even considered the stress you're putting on me, on our child?" Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose, shame mingling with frustration. "Catherine, I'm sorry. My life. It felt like it was missing something. I couldn't control it. Everything just spiraled. Missing something," Catherine repeated, her voice choked with emotion. "We built a life together, and I'm carrying your child. And you say you're missing something?" He had no answer that would satisfy her. The room reverberated with silence until Catherine finally spoke again. "You need to decide, Alexander. I'm not going to share you with anyone. If you want this marriage, if you want to be a father, you have to cut her out of your life. Completely." Alexander stared at the floor, weighed down by 1,000 unspoken fears. He thought of Anastasia's piercing green eyes, her effervescent laughter, the sense of forbidden freedom she awakened in him. But he also thought of Catherine's steady heart, her unwavering love, and the unborn child he had a duty to protect. The decision was monstrous, yet also straightforward. Family or mistress? "I need time," he whispered finally, afraid to look Catherine in the eye. "You have until tomorrow," she said, not unkindly. "Otherwise, I'll do what I have to do for myself and for this baby." Alexander nodded, the gravity of her words crashing over him. He turned away, unable to face the devastation etched on her features. As he climbed the grand staircase to their bedroom, he felt as though each step carried him closer to a decision that would reshape his life forever. But fate as it often does, had other, more dramatic plans in store. Anastasia Pierce had reached her breaking point. The night before, she and Alexander had exchanged tense text messages. His vague reassurances did little to calm her growing apprehension. A new fear clutched at her heart. What if Alexander never truly intended to leave Catherine? What if all his promises were just a mirage, dangling before her to keep her interested while he juggled a double life? In a moment of reckless determination, Anastasia decided to force Alexander's hand. She dressed in a tailored navy trench coat, stepping out into the drizzly morning air, and hailed a taxi to Westbridge Hills. The journey felt eternal. Nervous energy sparked in her chest as the suburban scenery glided by a realm of manicured lawns and million-dollar estates. So quiet, it was almost unnerving. She clutched her phone, ignoring a series of missed calls from Alexander. Let him worry, she thought grimly. Arriving at the Van Doren mansion, she stepped out onto the gravel driveway, her heels crunching ominously. The mansion loomed before her, a testament to the wealth and power that Alexander commanded. If he truly wanted a life with her, he had to be honest. She squared her shoulders and marched to the front door, ringing the bell with a steely determination. It was Catherine who opened it. The two women locked eyes for a moment. Catherine, heavily pregnant, was taken aback by the visitor's striking beauty and unwavering stare. Recognition dawned on her face. She'd seen that face in the photos. Instantly, her heart pounded like a war drum. Anastasia Pierce, the woman, introduced herself, barely managing the politeness to offer a tight, thin-lipped smile. "I'm here to see Alexander." Catherine inhaled a trembling breath. So this was the woman who had disrupted her life. Anger roiled beneath her outward composure. "Alexander isn't home," Catherine said icily, stepping aside to block any attempt of entry. "Then I'll wait," Anastasia replied, her voice resolute. She took a daring step forward, as if challenging Catherine to stop her. The tension in the foyer was suffocating. Catherine's fists clenched involuntarily. "You have no right to be here," she hissed. "You've already caused enough harm." Anastasia met her gaze, anger flaring in her emerald eyes. "Listen, Catherine," she said, her tone unyielding. "I know this is painful, but I'm not the only one responsible. Alexander led me on. He promised me." Catherine cut her off, voice quavering with a mix of rage and despair. "Promised you what? A life together? A future? And what about my future? Our child's future?" In that moment, both women realized how intricately their fates had become entwined by one man's lies. The confrontation escalated into a chaotic exchange of accusations and heartbreak, culminating in a stark ultimatum from Anastasia: "If Alexander doesn't choose me, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man he really is." Before Catherine could respond, headlights swept over the driveway as Alexander's car pulled in. He stepped out, shock painted all over his face at the sight of the two women. His mistress and his wife, both pregnant, with questions, accusations, demands, stood mere feet apart, and he was the linchpin in this entire, spiraling disaster. Little did Alexander realize the damage was already done, and that destiny had yet another cruel twist waiting around the corner. The wind picked up again as storm clouds gathered above Westbridge Hills, painting the sky a deep grey. Alexander hurried to the front steps, his heart pounding from the moment he recognized Anastasia's sleek figure standing face to face with Catherine. "Alexander," Anastasia said stiffly, hands balled at her sides. Her eyes flicked to Catherine's pregnant belly, then back to him. "We need to talk." "Inside," Catherine added, her voice cold. "Now." Alexander could scarcely breathe under the weight of their combined fury. He led them to the living room, a space usually reserved for elegant gatherings and polite conversation. Today, it felt like the stage for a tragic showdown. The air crackled with tension as they stood in a triangle, Catherine by the grand piano, Anastasia near the fireplace. and Alexander between them, his expression etched with desperation. He turned to Anastasia first. "What are you doing here? This is my home. You can't just—" She cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't you dare scold me. You've been avoiding me, dodging my questions. You promised me a life, a future. I deserve an explanation." Catherine's gaze was laser-focused on Alexander. "So it's true. She came to stake her claim in our home, Alexander." Her voice trembled with unmasked hurt. "Did you even think about what this would do to me? To your child?" Alexander's head swiveled from one to the other, panic shining in his eyes. "Catherine, Anastasia, this got out of control. I never wanted to hurt either of you. Yet here we are." Anastasia fired back. "Stop pretending you're some helpless bystander. You orchestrated this. You promised me a fresh start, and now you're looking at me like I'm a stranger." Silence smothered the room. Catherine found her breath uneven, anxiety pressing down on her like a vise. She spoke slowly, trying to maintain composure. "You told me last night you needed time. Well, time's up. Choose now, Alexander. Tell her to leave and cut ties for good, or we're done." The ultimatum hung in the air, a loaded gun aimed at the fragile life he'd built. Alexander looked at Anastasia, whose jaw was set in defiance. Then he turned to Catherine, her eyes dark with betrayal, one hand protectively resting on her belly. A swirl of images raced through his mind. The vow he'd taken with Catherine, the child that was mere weeks away from coming into the world, the nights of stolen passion with Anastasia, the promises he'd made in whispered hushes. His throat felt dry as desert sand. He paused, swallowed. "I choose Catherine. This is my family. I can't abandon my wife and our baby." Anastasia recoiled as though slapped. "You're making a mistake," she said, voice shaking. "You told me you were unhappy, that you wanted out." Alexander closed his eyes. Maybe I said things in the heat of the moment, but it's over. We're done, Anastasia." Tears welled in Anastasia's eyes. Part of her had expected this answer, but hearing it aloud shattered her illusions. She shot Catherine a look that was equal parts fury and sorrow. "You think you've won?" she said in a voice strangled by heartbreak. "He'll do it again. Men like Alexander never change." With that, she spun on her heel and headed for the door, leaving Alexander and Catherine in the hush of aftermath. But even as the door slammed shut, Catherine could not find relief. Instead, a deep, unsettling dread settled in her chest. Something in Anastasia's parting words, in her aura of steely resolve, warned that this was far from over. In the days that followed, Alexander tried to make amends, but Catherine's trust had been severely eroded. She went through the motions, allowing him to accompany her to doctor appointments, letting him place a comforting hand on her shoulder, but he could sense the emotional chasm that now divided them. The staff at the mansion tried to maintain a veneer of normalcy, but whispers circulated. Servants exchanged nervous glances. The air felt fraught with unspoken truths and dangerous secrets. For Alexander, guilt was a relentless spectre. He took extended leaves from his work, passing off responsibilities to his junior partners so he could focus on repairing his marriage. But whenever Catherine caught him texting on his phone, her face would darken, consumed by the bitter memory of his betrayal. Sensing her suspicion, Alexander tried to distance himself from anything that might link him back to Anastasia. He blocked her number, deleted their photos, and tried to bury every trace of her existence. But forgetting is often easier said than done. Meanwhile, Anastasia seethed in her small condo across town, nursing the wounds of rejection. She ruminated over every promise Alexander had made, every glance, every caress. Had it all been a lie? Or had Catherine's pregnancy forced him into a corner he couldn't escape? Yet she refused to accept that her relationship with Alexander was truly finished. She told herself that men like him rarely stayed in the straight and narrow for long. All she needed was a moment, a single slip-up, to wedge herself back into his life, or at least to exact some measure of revenge for the heartbreak. On a particularly sleepless night, she scrolled through her phone, pausing at a saved voicemail from Alexander, left weeks ago. His voice was low, seductive, sweet as honey. "You're my shining star, Anna. I can't wait to build the life we've been dreaming about." She replayed it several times, tears of rage blurring her vision. Finally, with trembling fingers, she forwarded the voicemail to Catherine's email address, found on the Van Doren Foundation's official website. No note, no explanation, just raw evidence of Alexander's duplicity. Let Catherine decide how to interpret it. When Catherine woke the next morning, she found the voicemail in her inbox. Listening to it felt like ripping open barely healed wounds. She stared at her phone in disbelief, the numbness giving way to anger. Alexander was still asleep beside her, oblivious to her discovery. She wanted to wake him, to scream, to demand why he had ever said those words. But she fought the urge. Instead, she slipped out of bed and walked to the nursery. The pastel walls, the mobile gently spinning over the crib, all reminded her of what was at stake, her baby's future. Sighing, she sank into the rocking chair, the phone screen casting a pale glow in the dim morning light. She was tired physically, emotionally, spiritually, tired of feeling powerless. A plan began to form in her mind. If Alexander had indeed ended things, then Anastasia's meddling might be an act of desperation. But if he was lying, Catherine intended to find out. No more half measures. She was determined to lay this entire mess bare, consequences be damned. A new storm system rolled over the coast, lightning slicing the sky in eerie flashes. The thunder echoed like a premonition of chaos yet to come. Catherine decided she couldn't wait any longer. She approached Alexander in his study, face solemn, heart pounding. "We need to talk," she said, her voice devoid of the softness he once loved. The man across from her looked fatigued, but she showed little sympathy. He nodded, shutting his laptop. "What is it, Kath?" She held up her phone, her gaze cold. "Anastasia forwarded me a voicemail. From you." Alexander's face tightened, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Catherine, that's old. Before I decided to fix things with you, I swear. Then why is she sending it now?" Catherine demanded, forcing her rising anger down. "Are you still in contact?" "No," he said firmly. "I told you. I ended it. She won't leave me alone. She's upset." Catherine wanted to believe him, but trust had become a fragile concept in her life. "I'm giving you one chance to prove you're telling the truth," she said. "Meet with Anastasia face to face. Make it clear, once and for all, that she has no place in our lives. That might be the only way she'll stop harassing us." Alexander swallowed hard. He imagined Anastasia's pleading eyes, the swirl of unspoken sorrow between them. But Catherine was right. There was no other way to end this cleanly. "Fine," he said, his voice tinged with resignation. "I'll do it. On one condition, you come with me. Let there be no confusion." Catherine paused. The idea of confronting her husband's mistress again filled her with dread, but perhaps this was the closure they needed. "All right," she agreed quietly. "We'll do it together." That evening, a meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a private lounge in a boutique hotel. Downtown, quiet enough for discreet conversation. Rain hammered against the windows as the trio converged. Anastasia arrived first, nursing a glass of wine at a corner table. Catherine and Alexander appeared moments later, side by side but maintaining a formal distance. Alexander wasted no time. "Anna," he said tightly, "this needs to end. We're done. I'm choosing my family." Anastasia's eyes flickered with wounded pride. She made a visible effort to remain composed, though her voice quivered. "Are you sure, Alex? After everything we shared?" Catherine stiffened, her arms crossed. "He's sure," she cut in, refusing to be intimidated. "We both are." The lounge was nearly empty, their voices resonating with a tense intimacy. Anastasia inhaled sharply, as if grappling with her next words. "Fine," she said, forcing a shrug. "But I didn't come here to beg. I came to warn you. If you think I'm going to disappear quietly, you're mistaken." Lightning illuminated the windows, revealing streaks of rain that smeared the night sky. Catherine's heart hammered. "What are you talking about?" Anastasia leaned forward, her green eyes narrowing. "Alexander promised me more than just sweet words. He made business deals in my name, gave me insider information. It's all documented, Catherine. I could ruin him or your precious Van Doren name if I wanted to." Alexander paled. "Anna, you wouldn't," he whispered, realizing the depth of the betrayal he'd enabled. A bitter smile tugged at Anastasia's lips. "Don't corner a wounded animal, darling. You never know how vicious it might become." The flash of lightning outside was blinding, followed by a crack of thunder so loud it rattled the chandelier overhead. In that moment, all pretense of civility shattered, and Catherine realized that the storms raging within their lives were far from over. The next morning brought a jarring sense of urgency. Catherine woke early, anxiety dancing across her heart. She paced the corridors of the Van Doren mansion, imagining the headlines if Anastasia unleashed her secrets. Alexander's shady dealings might become a public spectacle, and their child would be born into a maelstrom of scandal. She recalled every charity event, every press conference, every philanthropic project that bore the Van Doren name. Reputations could be destroyed in a single headline, but her concerns went beyond image. She feared for Alexander's mental state. Though she resented him for his betrayal, she also recognized that his world had been built on high stakes and risk-taking. If everything came crashing down, would he survive the fall? Meanwhile, Alexander was consumed with damage control. He made frantic calls to his attorneys, his business associates, even calling in favors from local politicians. All the while, he refused to look Catherine in the eye, as if the shame of his affair and the fear of public ruin were more than he could bear. Just when Catherine thought she'd seen the worst, a stern knock sounded at the mansion's front door. A courier arrived with a sealed envelope addressed to Alexander. Inside, they found copies of files implicating him in insider trading and shady property acquisitions documents that bore Anastasia's name in key places. A handwritten note in flamboyant cursive was included. "Decide how this ends, AP." Alexander sank into a leather armchair, burying his face in his hands. "She's not bluffing," he whispered, voice trembling. "I gave her access to some deals. She knows everything." Catherine's mind whirled. She felt a rush of anger, betrayal, and dread. "Why, Alex? Why risk everything we've built?" He looked up at her, hollow-eyed. "Because I thought I was invincible, unstoppable. I got caught up in the thrill of it all. Now it's over." Catherine inhaled sharply, feeling a wave of dizziness. She pressed a hand to her belly, steadying herself. The baby was due any day now, and she realized she needed to protect herself and their child. "We can't let her blackmail us," she said resolutely. "We have to go to the authorities or fight this head-on, or..." The conversation was interrupted by her sudden gasp. A sharp pain rippled through her abdomen, and she doubled over. Alexander rushed to her side, eyes flaring in alarm. "What's wrong? My water broke," Catherine managed between labored breaths. "It's time." Panic surged through Alexander. Everything else, Anastasia, the documents, the scandal, became secondary. He scooped Catherine into his arms, shouting for the driver to bring the car around. Within minutes, they were racing to the hospital, the tension of the mansion left behind, replaced by a new fear that Catherine and the baby might face complications. Yet even as they sped through the rain-slicked streets, one thought pulsed in Catherine's mind. Anastasia's threat still loomed. and nothing, not even the miracle of birth, could fully eclipse the darkness that had infiltrated their lives. She clung to Alexander's hand, uncertain whether this child's birth would bring them together or tear them apart once and for all. The drive to Westbridge Hills Medical Centre felt like a fever dream for Catherine. Every bump in the road sent a jolt of pain through her abdomen, and the contractions were coming fast, each wave sharper than the last. Alexander gripped the steering wheel with knuckles turned white, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Their previous worries, Anastasia's blackmail, the precarious business deals, receded in the urgency of impending parenthood. Upon arrival, nurses quickly wheeled Catherine into a private labor suite, and Alexander followed close behind. Alarms beeped softly in the background, the fluorescent lights lending the corridor a harsh brightness that only amplified Catherine's vulnerability. A flurry of medical staff attended her, checking vitals, hooking her up to monitors that tracked the baby's heartbeat. The rhythm was strong, steady, a reassuring sign that even amid this chaos, new life persisted. Alexander hovered at the bedside, stroking Catherine's hair as she breathed through the contractions. Tears shimmered in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quietly that she almost didn't hear. "I'm sorry for everything." Catherine looked into his face, searching for sincerity. Despite the pain, she managed a nod, acknowledging at least the sincerity of the moment, if not full forgiveness just yet. "Let's get through this first," she murmured, her voice tight with discomfort. And so began the longest hours of their lives. Each contraction felt like a crescendo, Catherine's breathing ragged as she tried to focus on the coaching from the obstetrician. Alexander offered her ice chips, whispered encouragement, and rubbed her back. In those moments, the memory of Anastasia and the documents receded, replaced by an all-consuming devotion to bringing their child into the world safely. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the doctor announced it was time for Catherine to push. She summoned every ounce of strength in her body, the pressure building to an almost unbearable peak. Lightning flashed outside the hospital windows, thunder rolling in a dramatic underscore to the miracle and madness of the evening. Alexander held her hand, pressing his forehead against hers, tears running down both their cheeks. One final push, and the room filled with the piercing cry of a newborn. Catherine collapsed back against the pillows, gasping. The world slowed as a nurse carefully wrapped the tiny, squirming infant in a soft blanket, then placed the baby in Catherine's arms. "It's a girl," the nurse announced, smiling warmly. The baby's cries softened as she felt her mother's warmth and her father's trembling hand gently stroking her cheek. In that moment, Catherine and Alexander locked eyes. A silent understanding passed between them, a recognition that, despite the betrayals and lies, they had created something precious. For the first time in months, hope flickered in Catherine's chest, even if it was fragile and overshadowed by the storms awaiting them outside the hospital walls. For a brief time, the world paused. Friends and family, those who hadn't already distanced themselves, sent congratulations. Nurses praised the baby's health. The newborn slept peacefully in a bassinet beside Catherine's bed, and Alexander found himself watching in awe, as if seeing true beauty for the first time. But reality waited, patient and unrelenting. On the second day of Catherine's hospital stay, Alexander stepped out to take a call from his lawyer. It was confirmed. Anastasia had indeed sent copies of incriminating documents to various media outlets, all set to publish unless Alexander met her demands. She wanted a substantial sum of money, enough to set her up for life, and a public apology that admitted no wrongdoing on her part but tarnished his own credibility. Alexander felt the walls closing in. He could pay her off, but it wouldn't end the speculation or the rumors. Worse, it would deplete his liquidity at a critical moment, possibly sabotaging the Charleston development deal. On the other hand, if he refused, he risked being charged with insider trading, an offense that could ruin him financially and legally. His mind reeled as he stared at the sterile hospital corridor, where the faint smell of antiseptic mingled with his own cold sweat. Returning to Catherine's side, he found her resting, the baby swaddled in her arms. He hesitated, torn between burdening her and wanting to share the weight. Guilt gnawed at him. Eventually, he told her everything. Catherine's first reaction was shock, followed swiftly by anger. But as she looked down at her sleeping daughter, a fierce, protective instinct overshadowed all else. "We can't let her destroy this family," she said firmly. "You need to fight back, but do it the right way." Alexander nodded, tears threatening to betray his composure. "I don't know how," he admitted. "The law is on her side if she has proof." Catherine set her jaw. "Then we need to find proof that she manipulated you too. Something that shows she isn't an innocent victim. Doesn't she have any skeletons in her closet?" A spark of possibility flickered in Alexander's eyes. Anastasia had once boasted about bending rules in her art curation business, forging documents to smuggle rare artifacts. Could that be leveraged? He wasn't sure. Still, the notion of exposing Anastasia's wrongdoing carried its own risks and moral dilemmas. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Alexander reached out to an old acquaintance, Daniel Remington, a tech-savvy investor who owed him a favor from their early days in real estate. Daniel was known for keeping hush-hush about grey area tasks, often skirting legal lines to get what he needed. Alexander felt a wave of distaste for resorting to such alliances, but the alternative was ruin. They met in a dimly lit parking garage beneath a high-rise downtown, reminiscent of a scene from a spy thriller. Rain dripped from overhead pipes, creating puddles that reflected the fluorescent glow of flickering lights. "You've really stepped in it this time, haven't you, Van Doren?" Daniel said, leaning against a concrete pillar, arms folded. Alexander exhaled heavily. "I need to protect my family, Dan. I messed up. Help me fix it." With a wry smile, Daniel nodded. "I'll do what I can. Get me her phone number, any email addresses, social media handles, anything. I'll see if there's something we can use to negotiate." Alexander handed over a small piece of paper with Anastasia's details. "Whatever you find, keep it quiet. I don't want to push her into a corner so badly that she lashes out. She's capable of anything right now." Daniel's eyes gleamed. Understood. Back at the mansion, Catherine sat in the nursery, feeding their daughter, whom they had named Elizabeth Grace Van Doren. The baby was a marvel, a tiny bundle of innocence and potential. Every coo and yawn tugged at Catherine's heart, reminding her of the life she wanted to protect, a life free from the shadow of scandal and betrayal. Alexander paced the hallway, phone in hand, awaiting Daniel's call. Eventually, it came. Daniel's voice crackled through the line. "I've found something." Anastasia had some questionable dealings with a private collector overseas. There might be grounds for accusing her of fraud or smuggling. The details are fuzzy, but the mere threat of exposing this might make her back off. Relief coursed through Alexander, though it was tainted by the bitterness of how low he was willing to sink. "All right, draft a statement. Send it to her. Make it clear that if she releases anything about me, I'll release what you found about her. Let's see if she calls our bluff." An uneasy truce settled over the Van Doren household as they waited for Anastasia's response. Days dragged on without any new media reports or blackmail messages. Catherine clung to hope, her focus shifting to Elizabeth's well-being. She began to imagine a future, maybe a smaller house, a calmer life. She'd even considered renting an apartment somewhere far away if the scandal erupted, determined to shield Elizabeth from the fallout. One afternoon, Catherine was in the living room, rocking Elizabeth in her arms while Alexander scrolled nervously through emails. Suddenly his phone buzzed. A message from Anastasia flashed across the screen. "You think you've outsmarted me? I'm not giving up that easily. Let's negotiate." Alexander glanced at Catherine. She nodded, silently urging him to handle the situation carefully. Responding promptly, Alexander typed, "We both have damaging information. Let's end this without mutual destruction. What do you want?" A minute passed, felt like an eternity before Anastasia's next message arrived. A sum of money. Enough to cover damages and lost opportunities. "Once I have it, I disappear. No more threats." Bile rose in Alexander's throat. He typed through gritted teeth, "Where and when?" She shot back a location, a chic cafe in the city, and a time, tomorrow afternoon. Alexander's mind churned. Meeting in public reduced the risk of confrontation, but it also meant there'd be watchful eyes. He'd have to be cautious. Catherine insisted on coming along, but Alexander shook his head. "We can't risk that. If we push her too hard, she might become vindictive again." Reluctantly, Catherine agreed, but she insisted on a safeguard. Alexander would wear a small recording device, courtesy of Daniel's connections, to capture any incriminating admissions. If Anastasia tried to renege or twist the agreement, they'd have tangible evidence to protect themselves. The next day arrived, overcast and drizzling. Alexander parked a few blocks from the cafe, briefcase in hand. Inside the case was a fraction of the money Anastasia demanded, with a promise of the rest to be wired to an account once she confirmed the destruction of all incriminating documents. Daniel lurked in a nearby car, ready to call the police if things went sideways. Alexander's heart hammered as he stepped inside. Anastasia was seated in a corner booth, wearing large sunglasses despite the grey day. She signaled him over, her smile a precarious blend of regret and defiance. "Busy day?" she asked, voice dripping with irony. Alexander ignored the small talk and placed the briefcase on the table. "Here's your partial payment. You'll get the rest when I have proof you've deleted every file and retracted every statement." Anastasia removed her sunglasses, revealing reddened eyes that hinted at sleepless nights. "You really believe I wanted it to come to this, Alexander? I loved you." A pang of something, guilt, pity, flickered across his face. "We both made mistakes, but you went too far, Anna. Blackmail isn't love." She sighed, tears threatening but never quite falling. "I just wanted the life you promised. Everything else was me lashing out." He slid a small flash drive across the table. "This contains evidence of your dealings abroad. Let this serve as a reminder not to cross me again." Her gaze hardened, and for a moment Alexander wondered if she might cause a scene. Instead, she took the flash drive, exhaling sharply. "Fine, I'll wipe the files, retract my leaks. But if you ever breathe a word about my dealings, I'll have my own backup plan. Do we understand each other?" Alexander nodded. The tension between them was suffocating, heavy with the ghosts of what might have been. With trembling hands, Anastasia unzipped the briefcase, checking the cash. Then she stood up, smoothing her coat. "You win, Alex. But trust me, life doesn't always hand out second chances. Whatever problems you had in your marriage, fix them, or you'll end up right back here." She brushed past him, leaving a faint trace of perfume in her wake. Outside, the drizzle had intensified into a steady rain. Alexander watched her disappear into the grey cityscape, a swirl of emotions too tangled to name. Part of him felt relief, another part sadness, and yet another part an unshakable sense of foreboding. Had he truly shut the door on this chapter, or had he merely postponed a worse disaster? Back in Westbridge Hills, Catherine waited anxiously by the fireplace, Elizabeth asleep in her nursery. When Alexander finally returned, drenched from the rain, she saw the exhaustion etched in every line on his face. Without speaking, he sank onto the sofa beside her. The crackling fire cast flickering shadows on the walls, as if echoing the turbulent shadows that still haunted them. "It's done," he said quietly. "She'll back off." Catherine searched his face for reassurance. "And the evidence? She'll destroy it?" He nodded, though not entirely convincingly. "That's what she agreed to." Reaching out, he took her hand, his voice trembling slightly. "Catherine, I know I've hurt you deeply. I know sorry doesn't fix everything, but I want to try, for Elizabeth, for us. I promise you, I'm finished with lies." She studied him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting both the pain of betrayal and the flicker of renewed hope. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. "Then we'll try. We'll go to therapy, rebuild trust one day at a time. But I won't ever go back to how things were, Alexander. Our daughter deserves better than that." He nodded fervently. "She does. We all do." In the weeks that followed, life took on a new texture, cautious, subdued, but not without glimmers of promise. The public scandal never materialized. The media moved on to the next sensation, and Alexander's lawyers quietly settled any lingering legal concerns behind closed doors. The Charleston deal pulled through, albeit at a tighter margin, and Alexander scaled back his ambitions. Realizing he could no longer juggle illusions and deception with the role of husband and father, Catherine found solace in motherhood, bonding with Elizabeth in the nursery she had lovingly designed. She began writing poetry again, using her pen as a means to process the swirl of emotions. Piece by piece, the Van Doren mansion shifted from a battleground of secrets into a haven where forgiveness might just take root. They often reflected on the darkest hours, the forgotten birthday that set everything in motion, the confrontation with Anastasia at the mansion, the heartbreak that almost tore them apart. Yet through sheer tenacity and a baby's gentle laughter, they found the resolve to keep moving forward. A fragile peace had settled over their lives, but they knew it would take endless care to maintain. For Catherine, each dawn was a chance to decide anew whether to trust Alexander, to trust herself, and to trust in the future of their family. For Alexander, every kiss he placed on Elizabeth's forehead reminded him of the responsibility he bore, the vow he'd nearly broken beyond repair. "Let's make this work," Catherine would say, gazing at their daughter curled in her crib. "Yes," Alexander would echo, voice hushed with humility. "Let's make it work." And in that quiet promise, day by day, they chose each other, determined to cling to the precious gift of life that bound them together even after almost losing it all. And so ends the turbulent tale of Alexander and Catherine Van Doren, a cautionary reminder that even the wealthy cannot buy freedom from the consequences of betrayal. In the wake of heartbreak and near disaster, they stand at a crossroads where forgiveness is an everyday choice, and trust is rebuilt brick by painstaking brick. Anastasia's legacy haunts them still, a reminder of how quickly desire and deceit can unravel a life of apparent perfection. Yet in the fragile laughter of a newborn baby, Alexander and Catherine have found a reason to hope, a testament to the power.
Sometimes the most unexpected betrayals are the ones that shatter our entire reality. Picture a loving mother, a devoted wife stepping into the grand lobby of the Hyatt Regency in downtown Chicago, her pulse quickening at the thought of surprising her husband on his routine business trip. Yet instead of his welcoming embrace, she is greeted by a sight that rips her world apart. A tender kiss shared between him and a mysterious woman in a sleek black coat. In that single heart-stopping moment, everything changes. Secrets spill into the open heart's break, and as a new chapter begins, it unfolds into a storm of regret, revenge, and the ultimate fight for hope. Emma Davenport woke to the sound of her alarm clock vibrating stubbornly on the bedside table, its gentle buzzing a relentless reminder of the hectic day ahead. She blinked herself awake momentarily, disoriented by the early dawn light cutting through the thin curtains. For a moment, she simply lay there, taking in the comforting smell of fresh linen and the faint lemony tang of the cleaning spray she always used. Next to her, the bed was cold and empty. Mark had left for Chicago the previous afternoon, attending yet another financial conference as part of his ever-demanding job at Harper & Green Investments. Their 3-year-old daughter Lily stirred in the next room. Emma could hear the soft hum of a lullaby playing from the child's nightlight, a small giraffe that projected stars onto the ceiling. She swung her legs off the bed and headed to Lily's room, her mind already flipping through the day's tasks. She planned to surprise Mark in Chicago that evening. Over the last few months, an uneasy feeling had gnawed at her, a suspicion she kept pushing aside. While Mark claimed to be overwhelmed with work, she wanted to see for herself if everything was really as he said. She scooped Lily into her arms, inhaling the sweet baby shampoo in her daughter's hair. A wave of resolve swept over her. For years, she had trusted Mark blindly. He was the calm, steady presence in her life, a man who made time for bedtime stories and neighborhood barbecues even as he rose through the ranks of his firm. Yet something had changed. It was in the way he avoided her eyes at the dinner table, in the vague excuses he made after late-night phone calls. Emma needed clarity, and she was determined to get it. Despite her growing worries, Emma couldn't forget the man who once charmed her with fresh daisies on their first date. In the early days, Mark was her everything. They had met by chance at an art gallery in downtown Seattle, introduced by mutual acquaintances. Emma had been immediately drawn to his warm laugh and quiet confidence. They shared a passion for exploring museums, volunteering at local charities, and dreaming of a future filled with travel love and children. But as Mark climbed higher in his career, work trips became the norm. It started slowly, a day trip to Los Angeles, a 2-night conference in Boston. Emma had brushed off any concerns back then, reminding herself that she had married a man with ambition. His success was their success. But with each promotion, Mark's job demands soared. His phone was forever buzzing with new messages. His eyes flickered with tension whenever she asked questions. A month ago, Emma found a receipt in Mark's coat pocket from the St. Regis Hotel in Chicago. It was for a lavish dinner for 2. Mark had told her it was merely a networking meal with a prospective client named Mr. Townsend. Yet the scrawled signature on the receipt wasn't Mark's handwriting. Alarm bells rang in Emma's mind, but she was too afraid to push him, afraid of what she might learn. In the back of her mind, she clung to a fragile hope that there was an innocent explanation. That morning, as she kissed Lily goodbye and entrusted her to the care of her mother, Linda Pierce, Emma's nerves twisted in her stomach. She told herself she was just going to surprise Mark, to remind him that his family was right here, waiting and loving him. She prayed that her doubts were unfounded, and that by nightfall they would be laughing about her silly suspicions. She had no idea that what she would witness in a few short hours would change everything. The drive from their suburban home in Lake Forest to Chicago was typically just over an hour, but traffic stretched it to nearly 2. Emma found herself tapping her fingers anxiously on the steering wheel, eyes flicking to the clock every few minutes. She had planned her arrival to coincide with Mark's break between conference sessions. The plan was simple: appear in the hotel lobby around 7 in the evening. Text him to meet her by the grand staircase and greet him with a heartfelt kiss. She hoped the spontaneity would reignite the spark that had dwindled over the past year. As she navigated the bustling city streets, Emma remembered how much she used to love Chicago. She had attended college here years ago and always found an unmatched energy in its towering skyline. Now the once exciting metropolis felt daunting, its tall buildings pressing in on her. She turned onto Michigan Avenue, weaving through throngs of pedestrians. With every mile, her heart pounded faster. She parked in an underground garage and made her way to the Hyatt Regency, an enormous structure that soared above the city. Emma swiped a bit of lipstick across her lips, checked her reflection in the mirrored panels near the revolving doors, and took a calming breath. She tried not to let her anxious thoughts overshadow her intentions. If she was going to face Mark, it had to be with confidence. Clutching her purse, she stepped into the grand lobby with its marble floors and lofty ceilings. She could almost imagine Mark's surprised grin, the way he'd lift her up in a twirl. But as she scanned the opulent space, she didn't see him at the lounge or by the registration desk. Instead, she saw something else, something that made her freeze in her tracks. There near the bar area, under soft golden lights, sat Mark. He wasn't alone. A woman with dark, cascading hair leaned close, her hand resting intimately on his arm. Emma's brain struggled to process what she was seeing. For a second, she prayed it was some misunderstanding. Perhaps this was a colleague, and they were discussing business details. But then Mark turned to the woman, and their lips met in a slow, unmistakably romantic kiss. Emma felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Numbness washed over her entire body. Her feet rooted to the spot, and it was as if the rest of the world faded away, leaving only the horrifying sight of her husband kissing a stranger. It was surreal, like a bad dream from which she couldn't wake. She stood there not more than 20 feet away, unnoticed by Mark. The woman, elegantly dressed in a fitted black coat, pulled back and gazed adoringly at him. Emma recognized that look. It was the look of someone deeply involved. She realized with acute clarity that this wasn't just a casual fling. This was something that had been going on long enough for them to appear entirely at ease in public. Tears pricked the back of her eyes, but fury overcame her shock. How dare he do this here so blatantly? She wanted to stride across the lobby, slap him, make a scene. 1,000 impulses warred in her mind. Heartbreak, anger, confusion, and the fragile remains of her dignity. Ultimately, she took a shaking breath and backed away, retreating into the shadows of the expansive corridor, leaving Mark and his mistress, who for now remained oblivious to Emma's presence. Emma didn't remember how she got from the hotel to the street. One moment, she was inside that marble lobby, watching Mark betray her. The next, she was stumbling onto the sidewalk, swallowing lungfuls of the frigid Chicago air. Her phone buzzed in her purse, but she couldn't bring herself to look at it. If it was Mark, she didn't want to talk to him. If it was anyone else, she couldn't summon the strength to explain what she'd just witnessed. For what felt like hours, she wandered aimlessly along the streets, tears streaming down her cheeks. She replayed the scene in her head over and over, each iteration stabbing deeper than the last. Glimpses of their life together flashed before her eyes. Mark's smile on their wedding day, the time he wept with joy when Lily was born, the nights he would scoop her into his arms and promise her the world. How could that same man now be kissing another woman without remorse? Eventually, she found herself standing near a small park, the lights from a nearby cafe illuminating the tears on her face. She sank onto a bench and let her emotions course through her. Anger flared white-hot, mingling with heartbreak. She wanted answers, yet the thought of confronting Mark right now was too much to bear. Her phone buzzed again. Summoning her nerve, she pulled it out to see a text from her mother Linda, who asked, "How's the surprise going? Is Mark excited?" Lily's asking for her daddy. Emma's gut twisted as she read the words. How could she ever explain this to Lily? She typed a quick, shaky reply. Not great. I'll be home soon. Then she hailed a taxi back to her car, her mind already plotting her next move. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She paced the living room, waiting for Mark to return from Chicago. She had no intention of revealing she had gone there to see him. Let him try to lie his way out. First, she wanted to see how deep his betrayal would go. Around midnight, Mark finally strode into the house with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder and the faint smell of hotel soap clinging to his skin. "Hey, honey," he greeted, sounding casual, almost loving, as though nothing was amiss. "Conference ran late. You didn't have to wait up." Emma forced a tight smile. "I wanted to see you," she replied coolly. In truth, she was marveling at his ability to pretend. Her heart hammered against her ribcage, and she felt the urge to scream at him to demand he tell her the truth. But she waited, letting the tension build between them. Mark went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and offered Emma one as well. As he turned around, she fixed him with a steady gaze. "Did you have dinner with Mr. Townsend again?" she asked, voice trembling lightly. He hesitated, eyes flicking away for the briefest moment before returning to hers. "Yeah," he lied smoothly. It was all business, just like before. Emma's anger flared at the blatant untruth. She clenched her fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms. She could feel her composure crumbling. Suddenly she snapped. "Stop lying to me, Mark. I saw you." His glass of water slipped from his fingers, shattering on the tile floor. For a moment, neither of them moved. The confession hung in the air heavier than the tension that preceded it. "Saw me," he whispered, face draining of color. Emma gulped a shaky breath, eyes brimming with tears. "I was at the Hyatt tonight. I saw you with her." She spat the final word with venom, each syllable echoing with betrayal. Mark's mind whirred as he scrambled to regain control of the situation. Emma watched his expressions shift from shock to denial, then to something like desperation. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally managed. "It's not what you think." Emma laughed a harsh, broken sound. "Oh, really? Because it looked like you and that woman were pretty cozy," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "Is she your mistress?" Mark raked a hand through his hair. She's Veronica Graham," he admitted, voice low. "She's a colleague from the firm. We've been seeing each other." Emma's stomach lurched, and she turned away, unable to look at him. Of all the words she expected to hear, his direct admission of guilt was both validating and soul-crushing. Why, she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and hurt. "Why would you do this to us?" He took a faltering step forward, only to stop when he saw her recoil. "It just happened." Mark tried, his voice shaking. "I've been under a lot of stress. Veronica understands my work. She's there late at night, pulling the same hours, dealing with the same pressures." "Don't!" Emma hissed, tears streaking her face. "Don't you dare reduce this to stress and late nights. We have a child, Mark. We had a life." He wiped a hand across his face. "I never stopped loving you," he insisted. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake." "That's a convenient word," she spat, "and one that doesn't mean much now. You think you can just come back, say it was a mistake, and everything is fine." She turned away again, her voice dropping to a pained whisper. "I trusted you." Mark tried to speak, but she cut him off with a trembling hand. "It's too late for apologies. You made your choice." With that, she fled to their bedroom, leaving him alone in the kitchen, shards of broken glass and cold water pooling around his feet, a fitting metaphor for the ruin of their marriage. Emma had always believed she could handle anything if she and Mark faced it together. But that night, as she curled into a tight ball on their bed, she realized she was on her own. The magnitude of his betrayal crushed her. The man she thought she knew inside and out had been leading a double life. How could she ever trust him again? Throughout the night, Emma wrestled with her thoughts. She heard Mark downstairs making phone calls, likely to Veronica. She wondered if he was telling her that Emma knew. The idea of them discussing her pain so casually left her furious and humiliated. She knew she couldn't stay in that house, playing the role of dutiful wife while Mark sorted out his affair. When Lily's soft cries broke the silence at dawn, Emma rose mechanically. She realized with sudden clarity what she had to do. She needed to leave. Emma's first priority was her daughter, protecting her from the fallout of this nightmare. As Lily's innocent eyes opened, Emma forced a reassuring smile onto her face, but inside her heart was in shreds. Once Lily was fed and dressed, Emma scribbled a short note for Mark. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." She set the note on the kitchen counter, next to the shards of broken glass that still lay there from the night before Mark hadn't even bothered to clean them up. It was symbolic, she realized, of how little he cared for order, now that his secret was out. Emma packed a suitcase, taking only essentials. She called her mother, but Linda didn't pick up. She didn't leave a voicemail. She wanted to make her move before Mark woke up. Give herself a head start. Within half an hour, Emma had Lily strapped into the back seat of the car and was pulling away from the life she had known. She drove eastward, not entirely sure where she was going. Emma had distant relatives in Michigan, an aunt named Eleanor, who'd moved to a lakeside property near Traverse City. It was a place Emma had visited a few times in childhood. Aunt Eleanor and Emma's mother had never been close, but Emma remembered her aunt as a kind, if somewhat reserved woman. With no other plan in mind, Emma dialed the number she found in an old address book tucked away in the glove compartment. To her relief, Eleanor picked up on the second ring, after a hasty explanation that left out most details. Emma asked if she and Lily could stay for a while. "We just need to get away," she confessed in a trembling voice. Despite years of little contact, Eleanor hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. The promise of a temporary haven calmed Emma's racing heart. She pressed down on the accelerator, determined to put as much distance as possible between them and Mark. Lily dozed in the back seat, hugging her little stuffed elephant. Every now and then Emma glanced in the rear-view mirror, tears stinging her eyes. She felt guilty uprooting Lily's life, but she believed she was protecting her daughter from the emotional storm. For now, at least they would be safe in a remote lakeside cottage, away from the chaos Mark's actions had unleashed. As the cityscape gave way to open highway, and then rolling farmland, Emma's thoughts drifted to what would happen next. She had no clear plan. The heartbreak was too fresh to think about lawyers or custody battles. But one thing was sure: she would not let Mark's betrayal define her or harm Lily. If he wanted to keep playing the role of an unfaithful husband, he would do it alone. Mark awoke in an empty house. The silence, usually comforting after a long trip, felt suffocating. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at his phone. No new messages from Emma. Confusion prickled at his mind. Normally Lily would be chattering in the living room, or Emma would have breakfast ready. He rolled out of bed, the events of the previous night seeping back into his consciousness like a poison. He found Emma's note on the kitchen counter. His stomach lurched as he read it. "I'm taking Lily away for a while. Don't follow us. We need space." Shock turned to panic. She was gone, and she had taken Lily. Mark ran a hand through his hair, guilt and fear swirling together. He reached for his phone, dialing Emma's number, but it went straight to voicemail. He tried Linda's number, hoping her mother would have some information, but Linda sounded just as alarmed when Mark mentioned Emma's disappearance. "What do you mean she's gone?" Linda demanded. "She left Lily with me yesterday morning. Now you're saying she took Lily away." When Mark's stunned silence answered her question well enough, and Linda hung up in anger, promising to find her daughter, Mark paced the house like a trapped animal, scanning for any sign of where Emma might have gone. He scoured her desk drawers, the bedroom closet, even the attic. There was no clue. All he found were the heart-breakingly empty spaces where Emma's clothes had been. The realization that she had planned this departure, packed Lily's things, wrote the note, and left without looking back, crushed him. He knew he had done this. He was the one who'd introduced deceit into their marriage, and now, facing the consequences, the depth of his regret began to sink in. But regret wouldn't bring Emma back. If he wanted to salvage anything, he would have to take drastic steps to win back his family's trust, assuming Emma would even give him the chance. Days stretched into a week, and still Emma did not return. Mark reached out to everyone he could think of, mutual friends, acquaintances, even distant relatives, but no one knew where Emma and Lily might be. In a moment of desperation, Mark confided in his best friend and co-worker, James Overton. James's advice was blunt. "You need a lawyer." Reluctantly, Mark scheduled an appointment with Rebecca Slater, a top family law attorney in Chicago. Sitting in her sleek office with floor-to-ceiling windows, Mark felt exposed and vulnerable. Rebecca studied him from behind her large mahogany desk, her expression unreadable. "So your wife left," she stated, scanning over the initial paperwork he had filled out, "and she took your child with her. Have you received any official communication regarding a divorce or custody arrangement?" Mark shook his head. "No. She left a note. That's it." "I've tried calling, texting, no response." Rebecca folded her hands. "Did you give her cause?" Mark's face burned. He cleared his throat. I had an affair." She found out. Rebecca nodded her gaze, never wavering. Infidelity can certainly precipitate drastic actions. "Look, we can file a petition for a formal custody arrangement, but if she hasn't filed for divorce yet, it's a bit tricky. Are you sure you want to go down that path immediately? Sometimes it escalates things beyond repair." Mark hesitated, tears pricking the corners of his eyes. All he truly wanted was to fix things with Emma, to apologize, to beg her forgiveness. But Emma was gone, and he had no idea how to reach her. "I just want to see my daughter," he whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." Rebecca's face softened slightly. "Let's hold off on immediate legal action. I'll do some private searching, see if we can find out where she might be staying. Once we know that, you can decide how to proceed. In the meantime, gather financial statements, property details, everything." Mark left her office feeling more lost than ever. He had set a ruinous ball in motion by kissing Veronica that night in the hotel lobby, by allowing their affair to blossom in the first place. Now, with Emma and Lily vanished, he realized the gaping void where his family used to be. For the first time, the possibility of never seeing them again crushed him beyond measure. Emma found a quiet solace in Aunt Eleanor's lakeside home. The weather was beginning to warm, melting the last patches of snow around the cabin's perimeter. Lily, oblivious to the drama unfolding, loved splashing at the shoreline with her tiny boots. She giggled when the cold water touched her toes and made a game of collecting shiny pebbles. Aunt Eleanor was an enigma. She did not pry for details about Emma's sudden arrival. Instead, she offered the comforts of home warm meals, a cozy bedroom, and an ample supply of patient understanding. Emma was grateful for the sanctuary. When she couldn't sleep at night, she'd wander down to the dock, staring out at the moonlit lake. The stillness of the water mirrored her new sense of limbo, not quite sure where she was headed, but certain she couldn't go back to the life she left. One evening, Aunt Eleanor joined Emma on the dock, handing her a steaming mug of tea. They stood in silence for a while, the night breeze rippling across the lake's surface. Finally, Eleanor spoke in her measured, quiet voice. "I don't need to know everything that happened, dear, but I can see the pain in your eyes." Emma nodded, tears brimming. "He cheated," she said. Simply. "I saw him, there's no doubt." Aunt Eleanor inhaled slowly. "I'm so sorry," she replied, setting a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "I'd never presume to tell you what to do, but know that if you need time, or if you need someone to lean on, I'm here." Emma exhaled shakily. "I just can't believe he'd throw away our family like that. Now I'm afraid of the future. Afraid he'll try to take Lily, or that I'll never be able to stand on my own 2 feet again." Eleanor's gaze was firm, yet kind. "Emma, you're stronger than you think. Start with today. Focus on what you need right now to keep yourself and Lily safe and stable." Over the following weeks, Emma took on small tasks to help Eleanor around the property. She found a moment of peace in the rhythm of raking leaves and planting new flowers. Lily thrived on the freedom chasing after butterflies and squealing with delight whenever a duck paddled near the shore. The constant ache of betrayal was still there, but day by day, Emma felt a small kernel of strength grow within her. While Emma and Lily found an uneasy peace in Michigan, Mark's mistress Veronica, Graham, was facing her own challenges. In the aftermath of Emma's disappearance, Mark had distanced himself from Veronica, plagued by guilt and worry. Their once passionate affair, fueled by late-night strategy sessions and stolen kisses in the office corridor, had begun to sour under the weight of real-life consequences. Veronica was no stranger to ambition. She thrived in the fast-paced environment of Harper & Green Investments. But rumors circulated quickly in corporate hallways. Whispers of the married Mark Davenport's affair reached many ears, and it didn't take long for people to link it to Veronica. The sly looks and hushed judgments weighed on her every time she walked into the office. She confronted Mark about his sudden coldness one evening when he agreed to meet her at a discreet cafe near their workplace. "I feel like you're punishing me for something." "We both chose," Veronica said, frustration evident in her voice. Mark rubbed his forehead. He looked tired, older somehow. "I'm not punishing you," he insisted. I'm worried about Emma and Lily." "She's gone, Veronica. I have no clue where she is. And it's my fault." Veronica reached out to take his hand, but Mark pulled away. The rejection stung. "You can't blame yourself entirely," she tried. "We both knew what we were doing. Emma finding out, well, that was never going to be clean or easy." Mark stared into his coffee cup. "That doesn't help," he said, voice hollow. "I need to make this right, but I don't even know how. Everything is a mess." Realizing the rift that had formed, Veronica felt resentment rise within her. She had risked her reputation and emotional well-being for a man who now seemed bent on retreating into his guilt. Still, she clung to the hope that she and Mark could weather the storm. After all, their bond went beyond mere lust, or so she believed. Frustrated by Rebecca Slater's slow progress and desperate for answers, Mark hired a private investigator named Jason Rudd. Jason came highly recommended by James Overton, who had once used him for a sensitive corporate matter. Though Mark felt uneasy about spying on his own wife, he rationalized that he had no other choice if he wanted to see Lily again. Jason was a middle-aged man with a calm demeanor and penetrating eyes. He listened intently as Mark recounted the night Emma left the note and the total lack of communication since. She's not using her credit cards or her phone. At least I can't trace anything, Mark explained anxiously. Jason nodded. She's being cautious. Likely she's using cash or a secondary bank account you're not aware of. He tapped a pen against his notepad. Any family she might rely on. Friends outside your circle. Mark thought about Emma's mother, but Linda didn't seem to know anything. Then he remembered Emma's father had passed away years ago. She has an aunt, I think, on her mother's side. Eleanor something. They weren't very close. Jason jotted down the name. Eleanor. That's a start. He handed Mark a stack of forms. Sign these. I'll check phone records, any property ownership under that name. It might take a while, but we'll find them. As Mark complied, his heart pounded with conflicting emotions. Hiring a PI felt like a violation of Emma's privacy, but the alternative, doing nothing, left him paralyzed. The memory of her tear-streaked face the night she confronted him sliced through his guilt. He told himself he was doing this for Lily's sake, to be a father again, to fix what he'd broken. A small part of him feared what he'd say if he actually found Emma. Could they repair the marriage? Would she ever forgive him? Each question led to more uncertainty. Yet, Mark pushed forward, fueled by desperation. Weeks passed in Michigan. Emma's life fell into a quiet, routine breakfast with Aunt Eleanor, and Lily walks by the lake, occasional trips to the small town for groceries. She had saved enough money to sustain them for a while, and Aunt Eleanor refused any rent payments, insisting Emma's presence was enough. Still, Emma knew she couldn't hide forever. She spent her nights reading about divorce laws, spousal support, and child custody. The words swam before her tired eyes, overwhelming her with legal jargon. She jotted questions in a notebook, hoping to someday get real legal advice. One afternoon, Emma received a phone call on the new prepaid cell phone she had purchased under a false name. To her surprise, it was Linda Pierce, her mother. Emma froze, torn between her desire to talk to the woman who raised her and her fear that Mark might be tracking their communication. "Mum," Emma whispered, stepping out onto the cabin's porch. "Oh, thank God," Linda exclaimed, relief evident in her voice. "Emma, are you all right? Mark told me you left, but he doesn't know where you are." Emma hesitated, tears springing to her eyes. She missed her mother desperately, but she also feared that Linda might share her location with Mark. "We're safe," she managed. "I can't tell you where, though." "Not yet." Linda sniffled. "I won't force you, but please know I'm worried." "Lily is okay." "She's fine, Mum. She's healthy and happy." Emma looked toward the lake where Lily was chasing after a butterfly. He betrayed me, Mum. I can't go back. Not now." "I understand," Linda replied. "I don't know what to think of Mark anymore. He seems genuinely torn up. But this is your decision, dear. Just promise me you'll stay in touch. I won't tell him anything you don't want me to." Emma allowed herself a tiny measure of comfort. "Thank you, Mum. I'll call again soon." As the call ended, Emma felt a strange combination of relief and guilt. She had reconnected with her mother, but she still felt guilty for cutting off Mark entirely. Yet every time she pictured him with that other woman, the heartbreak flared anew. She reminded herself she was protecting Lily, and she had no obligation to rush back into Mark's arms. Back in Chicago, Jason Rudd's investigation bore fruit. He discovered that a certain Eleanor Pierce owned a modest lakeside property near Traverse City, Michigan. Public records indicated a recent utility spike suggesting new occupants. Jason presented his findings to Mark in a manila envelope one morning at a discreet coffee shop. "This is likely where your wife is staying," Jason said matter-of-factly. "Based on what I've gathered, she's been there for at least a few weeks." Mark's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. A property deed with Eleanor Pierce's name, some bank transactions for groceries, a few photographs of Emma's car, parked discreetly off the main road. Guilt and hope twisted together in his chest. She was within driving distance, alive and well with Lily. "What do I do now?" Mark asked quietly. Jason shrugged. "That's your call. Legally, you can attempt to force her to return, or at least negotiate custody. But if you truly want to reconcile, showing up with a court order might not be the best approach." Mark swallowed hard, thinking of Emma's tearful face. "I just want to see my daughter," he repeated. "I want Emma to know how sorry I am." Jason gave him a curt nod. "Then go. But I'd advise you do it gently." Fueled by this revelation, Mark set out that same afternoon. The drive seemed endless, his thoughts a maelstrom. Would Emma slam the door in his face? Would she let Lily see him? Did he even deserve forgiveness? Each mile brought him closer to answers he might not be ready to hear. Late evening shadows stretched across the gravel road as Mark pulled up to the address Jason had provided. The cottage stood near the water's edge, lights glowing softly inside. Mark parked a short distance away, heart pounding in his ears. He approached the front porch, his mouth dry as sand. His footsteps sounded unnaturally loud on the wooden steps. Before he could knock, the door swung open, revealing Aunt Eleanor. She regarded him calmly, her lips a thin line of disapproval. "Mark," she said, voice cool. "I knew you'd come eventually." He nodded, swallowing hard. "May I see Emma?" Eleanor stepped aside, but didn't invite him in. "I'll get her. Wait here." Moments later, Emma appeared in the doorway. Her face paled at the sight of him, and she instinctively turned to check on Lily, who was napping in another room. Closing the door behind her, she joined him on the porch, crossing her arms protectively over her chest. "How did you find us?" she demanded, voice trembling with anger. Mark clenched and unclenched his fists. "I had to. I hired a PI." "Emma, I'm sorry." "Sorry," she repeated bitterly. "You come here with a private investigator's evidence spying on me and say you're sorry." He blinked back tears. "I couldn't just do nothing." "Emma, please. I had to see Lily. I'm not here to take her away. I want to see my daughter. And I want to talk. Can we please talk?" Emma stared at him, her emotions warring across her face. She glanced back at the cottage where Aunt Eleanor hovered in the doorway. Finally, she exhaled. "Fine. But Lily is asleep, and I don't want you waking her. We'll talk on the dock." Mark nodded, following her across the small yard to the lakeside dock. The moonlight reflected off the water, casting an ethereal glow over the surface. They stopped at the edge, the gentle sound of lapping waves filling the tension between them. They stood in silence for a moment, before Mark spoke, his voice cracking. "I've been going crazy not knowing where you were, if you were safe." Emma's jaw tightened. "I'm safe enough," she replied. her gaze fixed on the dark water. "And Lily is fine too. No thanks to you." Mark swallowed the lump in his throat. "I deserve that. Emma, I don't know if it helps, but I ended things with Veronica. I told her it's over. I'm willing to quit my job if that's what it takes to show you I'm serious about our marriage." Emma turned to look at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Our marriage?" she echoed. "You broke our marriage the moment you slept with her. Do you have any idea how humiliating it was for me to see you two together in that lobby?" His own eyes grew misty. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I was an idiot. I got caught up in the pressures of work, the excitement there's no excuse. I just want a chance to make it right." Emma laughed bitterly, tears spilling over. "Make it right? How, Mark? You expect me to pretend this never happened, to forget the image of you kissing her?" Her voice shook with anger. "You lied to me. You lied about business trips, about dinners with Mr. Townsend. You chose her over us. I never chose her over you." Mark insisted, his words tumbling out. "I was confused." Emma raised a trembling hand, stopping him. "That's the thing, Mark. You did choose her every time you went to her hotel room or stayed late at the office for those so-called meetings. Now it's too late to say it was a mistake. The damage is done." Mark's breath hitched. "Do you hate?" Emma's tears fell in earnest. "I hate what you've done. I hate that I have to look at Lily and know you betrayed us." She shook her head. "But I'm also hurt, and part of me still loves you. I hate that the most." A choking sob escaped Mark's lips. He reached out to her, but she stepped back. They stood there raw and wounded under the moonlight, an unbridgeable chasm between them. Their conversation stretched into the late hours. Emma refused to let Mark inside the cottage, but she eventually relented to his request to see Lily in the morning. They sat under the starlight, discussing logistics, how Mark might visit without driving Emma away for good, how to handle finances in the interim. When Emma finally slipped back into the cottage, Mark slept fitfully in his car. His mind reeled from the confrontation, from Emma's tearful rage, from the faint glimmer of hope that she had not declared outright that their marriage was over. At dawn, Lily's voice roused Emma from sleep. The child was excited to see the ducks on the lake, babbling in her toddler speak. Emma's heart clenched, knowing Mark was waiting just outside. She made a quick decision and led Lily to the porch. There Mark stood with dark circles under his eyes and a weary smile. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly, crouching down to Lily's eye level. The child looked unsure, hugging Emma's leg. For a moment, heartbreak flickered across Mark's face. He reached out gently, and Lily hesitated before stepping forward. "Daddy missed you," he whispered, pulling her into a delicate hug. Emma watched, tears brimming again. She reminded herself that Lily deserved a father, even if he was flawed. That tiny moment of reunion was enough to tear at Emma's carefully constructed wall. Part of her wanted to lash out and push him away. Another part wanted to bury her face in his chest to recall the warmth of the man she had loved. They spent a tense half-hour together, Mark helping Lily feed the ducks. Emma standing off to the side, arms folded protectively. When Lily asked if Daddy was coming home, Emma felt the sting of tears once again. She shook her head silently, unable to speak. Mark glanced at her, his eyes filled with regret. "Let's take this one step at a time," he murmured, more to Emma than to Lily. She gave him a curt nod, swallowing the pain, and hoping, for Lily's sake, that they could find a way to coexist, whatever that might look like. Over the following days, Mark rented a small cabin in the same area, a few miles down the lake. Emma allowed him carefully supervised visits with Lily, ensuring the child didn't suffer the sting of confusion or broken promises. It was an uneasy truce. Emma refused to discuss a permanent reconciliation. Her wounds were still too fresh. But she also didn't push for an immediate divorce, torn between her lingering love for Mark and her deep-seated anger. Aunt Eleanor silently observed the delicate dance between them, offering Emma private words of support, but never overstepping. She saw the torment in Emma's eyes and recognized the complexity of heartbreak, betrayal, and love colliding. Occasionally, Emma and Mark found themselves talking about mundane things, Lily's bedtime routines, her favorite songs, or what she ate for lunch. These trivial exchanges felt odd, yet somehow comforting. They were a reminder of the normalcy they once shared. Meanwhile, Mark's guilt weighed heavily. He kept his distance, respecting Emma's boundary. Each time he saw Lily's face light up at his arrival, he felt a dual pang of joy and despair. Would he ever be fully forgiven? Or was he doomed to this half-life, desperately clinging to fatherhood, while Emma rebuilt her own world without him? A month into this arrangement, Veronica made an unannounced appearance. She had tracked Mark's sudden absence from work, discovered his leads about Emma's location, and decided to confront him. Her arrival sent shockwaves through the fragile peace Emma and Mark had established. Veronica showed up at Mark's rented cabin, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. "You haven't returned my calls or texts," she spat. "I had to find you on my own. So this is where you ran off to playing house with your wife again?" Mark stiffened. "It's not like that," he tried to explain. "Veronica, I told you it's over. Emma and Lily are my family. I'm trying to fix things." Veronica let out a scornful laugh. "Fix things? You think you can just walk away from me, from everything we shared?" She gestured around. "Did you expect me to just vanish so you could rebuild your perfect suburban life?" Mark felt a surge of irritation mixed with shame. "We made a mistake," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm owning up to it now. There's nothing more to say." Unfortunately, Emma had arrived at that exact moment, intending to drop Lily off for a short visit. She froze at the sight of Veronica, her heart pounding with renewed fury. The scene was all too much, a vicious reminder of the betrayal that had driven her here in the first place. Veronica turned at the sound of Emma's footsteps, her stare turning icy. "So this is the woman you ran away to," she said, her tone dripping with contempt. "Isn't it ironic? Emma you ran, he chased you, and now the mistress is left behind." Before Emma could respond, Mark stepped forward. "Veronica, that's enough. This is between me and Emma." But Emma couldn't hold back her outrage. She marched up to Veronica, voice trembling. "Don't you dare twist this. You tore our marriage apart, and now you have the nerve to come here." Veronica's eyes flashed. "Your marriage was already in trouble, sweetheart. That's why Mark was with me in the first place." Emma's hand flew before she could stop herself, slapping Veronica hard across the face. Veronica staggered back, eyes wide with shock. Lily, who was strapped into a car seat behind Emma, began to cry at the commotion. Mark rushed to intervene. Tears burned in Emma's eyes. She realized how easily the veneer of civility had shattered. With a shaking breath, she turned to Mark. "This is exactly why I left," she said through gritted teeth. "There's no peace with you. It's all lies and chaos." And in that moment, Emma vowed she would finalize her decision. It was time to end this toxic circle and protect herself and her child once and for all. That evening, Emma called a divorce attorney in Traverse City named Michael Sanders, recommended by a local acquaintance. She explained her situation, the betrayal, her temporary residence, and her desire to protect Lily. Michael listened patiently, then laid out her options. "Given your circumstances, we can file here in Michigan, provided you establish residency," he explained. "But typically, jurisdiction could be contested by your husband if he files in Illinois. We'll need to act carefully to ensure your rights and Lily's interests are protected." Emma nodded, her hands trembling around the phone. She felt a strange clarity settle over her, like a burden lifting off her shoulders. She would no longer hide. She would fight for her daughter's stability and for her own future. The next day, she met Michael in person. His office was modest but tidy, and Emma found his demeanor reassuring. She handed him a stack of notes and documents she had painstakingly compiled, evidence of Mark's infidelity financial records, Lily's birth certificate. "I have to do this," she said, voice wavering. "I can't live in this in-between anymore." Michael patted her hand. "You're making a brave choice. We'll file the necessary paperwork. Be prepared your husband may contest it, and the process might get messy. But I'll guide you every step of the way." Emma exhaled. "Thank you," she whispered, tears hovering in her eyes. I want peace. For Lily and for myself." When Mark received the divorce papers by courier at his rented cabin, a wave of nausea nearly knocked him off balance. Even though he suspected this outcome, seeing it in black and white was a shock. The words hammered home the finality of what was happening. He hurried to Emma's cottage, ignoring the voice in his head that told him she might slam the door in his face. Aunt Eleanor answered her disapproval as evident as ever, but she allowed him to step inside when he begged for a moment of Emma's time. In the living room, Emma stood with her hands folded, her expression resigned. "You got the papers," she said calmly. Mark lifted the manila envelope. "Is this really what you want?" Emma swallowed, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to shed. "I don't see any other way. You cheated on me, Mark, and then you brought all that chaos here. I can't expose Lily to that kind of turmoil. She deserves better." He sank onto the sofa, shaking his head. "I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me easily. But can't we try counseling or a trial separation? Do we have to go straight to divorce?" Emma softened for a second, her gaze drifting to the hallway where Lily was playing. "I wish I could say yes," she murmured. "But we tried coexisting. Look what happened. Veronica showed up and it all fell apart again. I can't keep living like this, Mark. My heart is broken. I need to move on." Mark felt tears sting his eyes. "What about custody?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I don't want to lose Lily." Emma's jaw tightened. "We'll figure out an arrangement. She needs her father, but not if it means I'm constantly in agony." Mark nodded, tears slipping down his face. "I understand." He stood clutching the divorce papers as though they weighed 1,000 pounds. Before leaving, he managed a broken whisper. "I'm sorry, Emma. I love you. I always will." She didn't respond as he walked out the door. Only after he left did Emma allow herself the luxury of sinking to the floor, sobbing quietly, while Aunt Eleanor gently stroked her hair. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal filings, mediation sessions, and tense negotiations. Emma insisted on primary custody of Lily, with Mark allowed scheduled visitation. Despite his initial resistance, Mark eventually agreed. He realized that forcing a bitter custody battle would only hurt Lily, and he truly wanted the best for his daughter. Veronica, feeling the sting of rejection and the tarnish to her professional reputation, distanced herself from Mark and eventually left Harper & Green Investments to start over elsewhere. The last Mark heard, she had moved to New York, chasing another career opportunity, leaving Chicago and her entanglement with Mark behind. As the legalities of divorce progressed, Emma found unexpected support in her mother. Linda visited the lakeside cottage, bonding with Lily and offering Emma a shoulder to cry on. Slowly, Emma felt the suffocating pain, ease replaced by a cautious hope for the future. She began exploring freelance writing opportunities online, using her background in communications to earn an income. Mark, too, had to rebuild. He resigned from Harper & Green Investments after the scandal and took a lower-profile position at a smaller firm in the same industry. He attended therapy, trying to unravel the emotional blind spots that had led him astray. Though heartbreak lingered, he found solace in knowing he could still be part of Lily's life, visiting her on weekends and holidays according to the arrangement with Emma. Eventually, the divorce was finalized. The day Emma received the final decree, she stood by the lake once more, the wind ruffling her hair. A sense of bittersweet closure settled over her. She had loved Mark deeply, and part of her always would, but she understood now that love alone could not fix everything. Lily toddled up to her, holding a shiny pebble in her small hand. "For you, Mummy," she said, her eyes bright. Emma knelt down, taking the pebble and pulling Lily into a gentle hug. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "It's beautiful." In the distance, Aunt Eleanor watched with a soft smile. She remembered the frightened woman who had appeared on her doorstep all those months ago, searching for refuge. Now Emma stood taller, more assured, despite the heartbreak she had endured. That evening, Emma sat down at her laptop, beginning the process of searching for a place of her own, not too far from Aunt Eleanor's property. She wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by the serenity of nature, but she also needed to carve out an independent life. The phone rang a call from Mark. He was scheduled to see Lily that weekend. Emma's hand hovered over the phone for a moment before she answered. Their conversation was polite, cordial even. In that measured exchange, Emma recognized that while their romantic relationship might be irreparably broken, they could still strive for an amicable partnership as parents. And so life began anew for Emma Davenport, no longer a suburban wife living under the illusion of marital bliss, but a single mother forging her own path, confident in her ability to protect the tiny life in her care, and determined to heal her own wounded heart. This was the story of a shocking betrayal, a bold escape, and one mother's steadfast resolve to protect her child at all costs. Emma's world turned upside down the moment she discovered her husband in that hotel lobby. Yet she found the strength to leave and start over, even when her heart still ached with love and loss. Through family solitude and a fierce commitment to her daughter, she carved a new path for them both. If this story moved you or made you reflect on the power of a mother's love, please show your support. Like this video. If you believe in resilience, share it with anyone who needs a reminder that new beginnings are possible, and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt, dramatic, real-life stories. Your engagement helps us bring you more incredible tales of courage, heartbreak, and ultimate redemption. Thank you for listening.